Welcome to Lumos. Before we begin, I'd love if you could gently tap that like button. And if you enjoy these calm, wandering science stories, consider subscribing. It helps more curious, sleepy souls find their way here. I always love to hear from you in the comments. Tell me where in the world you were listening and what time your night has become. I find so much joy in those sleepy check-ins. Part 1. In the Canopy of Time. Not 1,000 years, not even 1,000,000. We must step into a time nearly 55 million years ago, when the Earth was warm, its continents clothed in great green forests that seemed endless. Imagine it, an ancient planet wrapped in jungle, the air humid, filled with scents of flowering plants and the buzz of insects larger and stranger than those we know today. Birds with long reptilian wings darted through the canopy. The land was alive with shapes and calls that would seem alien to us now. And there, high in the branches, moved our earliest ancestors, small primates. Their bodies were no larger than a modern squirrel. Their hands, though tiny, already curled around branches with a grasping strength. Their eyes faced forward, not to dream of the future, but to judge the distance of the next leap. In those leaps lay survival, and within survival, the blueprint of change. Picture them in your mind's eye, leaping from branch to branch, tails curling for balance, little faces glancing about with alertness. They knew nothing of the vast story they were beginning. They were simply living, plucking fruits, grooming one another, chattering in the language of instinct. Yet inside their bones, in the slow reshaping of their joints and skulls, was the whisper of what was to come. For evolution works in silence, without plan, without destination. And still, somehow, across the immense tides of time, it led to us. Now, let the forest surround you. Hear the distant call of a bird whose lineage has long since ended. Feel the damp air pressing against your skin. The ground below is dark, rich with fallen leaves, while above, the canopy is thick with life. The world is not empty of predators. Snakes coil in silence. Larger mammals stalk below. But here in the trees, our tiny ancestors cling to life, hiding, leaping, thriving. Each day a struggle. Each night, a fragile survival. And in their survival, a future is being written, though none of them could ever know it. Imagine lying back beneath that canopy, watching them. You might see one pause on a branch, tilting its head in curiosity. Perhaps that flicker of curiosity, that pause to look, not just to react, was one of the first sparks that, in ages to come, would grow into thought, into reflection, into the deep questions you and I ask even now. These creatures were not human. They had no words, no tools, no fire. But they were alive, deeply alive, and their aliveness was the seed of everything that followed. In their forward-facing eyes, in their grasping hands, in their quick minds trained for survival, lay the faint beginnings of the human story. And so, dear listener, this is where we begin. In a forest that no longer exists, among creatures who would never call themselves ancestors, yet carry within them the first faint traces of what would become us. Tonight, let us sit quietly with them in the branches, in the soft warmth of an ancient night. Let the rustle of leaves and the calls of unseen voices fill your imagination, until it feels as though you are there too, perched among the branches of time, watching the very first steps on a journey that would take millions of years. This is the first chapter of the long, slow evolution of Homo sapiens. And it begins not with humans, not even with apes, but with small, watchful creatures hidden in the canopy of time. Keep whole, voice in Enceladus. Welcome back, wanderer of the night. We step softly again into the ancient forests, letting time slip away from the present and dissolve into the deep past. Our story of Homo sapiens is not a race nor a straight path, but a quiet branching, like the twigs of a tree spreading outward, each one searching for the light. To understand ourselves, we must sit patiently at the base of that tree, watching as the branches divide. The primates of Part 1, small squirrel-like creatures darting through the canopy, have now changed. Millions upon millions of years have passed, though to them it was never felt as change. Each day was only another sunrise, another fruit to eat, another leap to make. But across that uncountable stretch of time, bodies shifted, bones lengthened, skulls grew, and behaviors adapted. The little primates of the Eocene forests gave way to larger beings with longer arms, broader shoulders, and sharper eyes. It is now somewhere between 30 and 20 million years ago, in what we call the Oligocene and early Miocene epochs. The Earth is alive with forests, though they are not quite the same as before. Continents drift, seas widen, mountains rise. And in the trees of Africa and Asia, new forms of primates appear, the early apes. Imagine them with me. A humid morning in an ancient rainforest. Mist hangs heavy between the trees, turning shafts of sunlight into soft golden beams. The calls of strange birds echo from the canopy. In the branches above, movement stirs. A shape swings slowly into view, not darting like a monkey, but moving with deliberate grace. Long arms reach and clasp branches, fingers curling around bark. The creature rests in a crook of the tree, gazing out with forward-facing eyes. Its face, though still distant from ours, carries an uncanny familiarity. These are the ancestors of the great apes. Their skeletons tell us stories. Their arms were long, their backs flexible, their grasp strong. They had no tails, unlike the monkeys that shared their forests. They climbed, they hung, they swung. They lived not in the quick scurry of leaps, but in the patient rhythm of suspension. Think of one ape now, cradling her infant in her arms. She is not human, but she is not entirely foreign either. She grooms the little one's fur, removes a burr, strokes its back to calm it. In that touch, we glimpse something profound, a tenderness, an attention to another's needs, a bond that is more than survival. This is not yet human love, not yet culture, but it is the faintest root of what will one day grow into care, into family, into the endless web of human connection. Keep whole voice in Enceladus. The branches of evolution spread wider now. Some of these apes will give rise to lines that flourish brilliantly, then vanish. Gibbons will become masters of speed, soaring through treetops with impossible agility. Gorillas will grow massive, rulers of valleys and mountains. Chimpanzees will become clever, mischievous, and emotional, their laughter and grief echoing ours so closely it unsettles us even now. But all of this lies ahead. In this moment, they are still one family, still bound together in the great canopy of life. The earth beneath them is restless. Volcanoes rise, climates shift, forests expand and contract like a breathing lung. When rain falls, rivers cut through the land, carving valleys that will one day hold stories of ancient bones. When drought comes, trees die, and creatures must move, adapt, or vanish. This is the stage upon which the apes live, a world never still, never safe, always asking its creatures to change or perish. Close your eyes and picture this ancient world, the air thick with scents of damp earth and flowering plants, the rustle of leaves high above as apes move through the branches. A distant predator prowls below, silent as shadow. Yet in the trees there is chatter, play, and rest. Young apes swing clumsily and fall, only to climb again. Adults groom one another, eyes half closed in comfort. Some forage for fruit, testing which branches bend and which break. Each gesture, each moment is ordinary in its own time, but across the sweep of millions of years, it becomes extraordinary. For hidden in these small moments is the shaping of the human story. Longer arms, sharper eyes, larger brains, each a step, so slow no one living would notice. But time notices, evolution notices. The tree of life divides again and again, branches splitting into new forms, some fragile, some strong. One of those branches, fragile as a thread, will stretch forward through the Miocene, through the Pliocene, into us. But here, in part 2, we simply watch as the branches first begin to spread. We sit beneath the canopy and listen to the early apes call to one another in voices that would sound alien to us now, yet carry the rhythm of something familiar. They are not yet human, but they are part of us. Their lives were the soil from which our story would grow. So let us linger here, in this forest of 30 million years ago. Let us sit with them as dawn gives way to noon, as rain falls softly on the leaves, as the apes move slowly through their green world. Time itself is in no hurry, and neither are we. For this is not a quick tale, but the patient unfolding of life. And tonight, we are only at the second chapter, watching the branches divide and wondering where they may lead. The Great Age of Apes. The night grows still, and we drift once more into the current of time. We have already sat among the tiny primates of the Eocene forests, and we have watched as the branches of life began to divide, giving rise to the earliest apes. Tonight, we move forward again, slipping gently into the Miocene epoch, a vast stretch of time between 23 and 5 million years ago, when the Earth was home to a rich and astonishing variety of apes. The Miocene is sometimes called the Golden Age of apes, and for good reason. Imagine Earth then. Great forests stretched across Africa, Europe, and Asia, teeming with life. The climate was warm and lush. Rivers wound their way through valleys. Plains rolled gently toward distant mountains. And in this world, apes flourished like never before. Dozens of species lived side by side, each shaped by its own environment, each an experiment written in bone and blood by the hand of evolution. Picture one such ape, Proconsul, an early Miocene creature who lived in the forests of Africa. Its body tells us a story. No tail, like the apes of today, but still moving in ways not yet like chimpanzees or gorillas. It walked along branches on all fours, grasping with hands and feet, its movements careful, deliberate. Its face bore hints of the familiar, a forward gaze, a thoughtful brow. Not human, but closer now, close enough that if you were to lock eyes with it, you might feel a strange stirring of recognition. Elsewhere, in the forests of Asia, lived Civipithecus. Imagine its reddish fur glowing in the filtered sunlight as it moves among the trees. Its face looked remarkably like that of a modern orangutan, the same broad, flat muzzle, the same soulful eyes. It was not an orangutan, but a cousin, carrying within its lineage the seeds of that future. If you could sit quietly on a branch and watch Civipithecus, you might see it crack open nuts, forage for fruits, move slowly and powerfully through the canopy. And you might feel, in its quiet intelligence, the faintest echo of our own. Keep whole voice in Enceladus. In Europe, another figure moves among the trees, Dryopithecus. Its long arms allow it to swing and climb with ease. Its teeth tell us it ate fruits, living in rich forests filled with abundance. Fossils suggest it may have resembled modern chimpanzees or gorillas, though it lived millions of years before them. Picture it resting in the branches, watching the forest below with keen, curious eyes. Like all apes of the Miocene, it had no idea that it was part of something larger, a vast family tree spreading across the continents, each branch trying its own way of being alive. The Miocene forests were alive with diversity. Apes of all sizes, from small, agile climbers to massive, powerful ground dwellers, filled the land. Some looked like modern apes. Others were stranger, with proportions we no longer see. Some thrived for millions of years, while others vanished almost as soon as they appeared. Evolution is not a straight road, but a great experiment, with many trials, many endings, and a few survivals. Now, pause with me and imagine this world as if you were drifting through it. The air is thick and warm, carrying the scent of damp leaves and fruit. Birds call in the distance. Insects buzz around shafts of golden light that break through the canopy. You hear the soft rustle of branches as an ape moves above you, its shadow crossing the ground like a fleeting ghost. Another clambers down to drink from a stream, its reflection rippling in the water. You are surrounded by life that feels familiar, yet alien, ancient, yet alive with possibility. It is here, in this golden age, that the ancestors of all modern apes, gorillas, chimpanzees, orangutans, and gibbons, took their shapes. And it is here too, hidden among countless branches, that the line leading to Homo sapiens continued its quiet, fragile journey. Most of the apes of the Miocene would vanish, leaving no descendants. Their bones would rest in stone, their stories waiting to be uncovered by curious hands millions of years later. But one line, one slender thread would endure. Think of that for a moment. Out of dozens of species, out of millions of years of thriving, only a few survived the shifting climates, the changing forests, the relentless demands of life. It was not strength alone that decided survival. Sometimes it was chance, sometimes geography, sometimes the smallest adaptations that made the difference. But survival was never guaranteed. Keep whole voice in Enceladus. And yet, without knowing it, without ever planning it, these apes carried us forward. Their eyes, their hands, their brains, each was a step closer to what would become human. If you could watch the Miocene unfold in fast motion, like clouds racing across the sky, you would see bodies changing, species rising and falling, landscapes opening and closing. And within that rush of change, you would see one path continue, fragile, winding, improbable, but unbroken. Tonight, we linger in this age of apes. We sit beneath the canopy as they move above us, their calls echoing through the forest. We watch them eat, play, fight, and rest. We let ourselves feel their presence, not as fossils in stone, but as living beings, part of a world that was once real, once filled with sound and breath. This is the Miocene, the great age of apes. And though they did not know it, though they lived only for their own survival, they were shaping the story of us. The first hominins, walking between worlds. Time presses gently forward. The Miocene has ended, and the Earth begins to change. Forests then, giving way to open spaces. Grasslands spreading like green seas beneath wide skies. The air carries a different rhythm now. Cooler winds, shifting rains, seasons turning more sharply. And with these changes, life must adapt or fade away. Among the many apes of the Miocene, most will vanish. Their forests shrink, their food dwindles, and their once thriving forms disappear into the past. But from this great loss, a few small sparks ignite. New creatures, unlike any that came before, step tentatively into existence.
They are not yet human, not even close, but they are hominins, the first of our true lineage. Close your eyes and imagine. It is about 7 million years ago, in what is now Chad, Africa. The sun is hot, the land a patchwork of woodland and open savanna. And there, moving quietly among the brush, is a creature called Sahelanthropus chadensis.
Keep whole voice in Enceladus. At first glance, it looks much like an ape. Small brain, heavy brow, short snout. But look closer. The shape of its skull tells us something extraordinary. Its head balanced in a way that suggests it sometimes stood upright. Not fully, not like us, but enough to hint at a new way of living. Its eyes face forward, its posture perhaps shifting between the trees and the ground. With each hesitant step, it marks the beginning of a new experiment, walking on 2 legs. Why did this matter? Imagine the world it lived in. Trees still offered fruit and shelter, but open grasslands demanded something different. Walking upright freed the hands. It gave a wider view of the horizon, a way to spot predators, to carry food, to endure long journeys beneath the sun. Small advantages, but over time, these would shape everything. Now, let us drift a little further to Ethiopia, about 6 million years ago. Here lived another hominin, Ororhyntugenensis, sometimes called the Millennium Man. Its bones whisper the same story. Long arms for climbing trees, but legs built strong, with hips and thighs hinting at bipedal motion. Ororhyn still lived comfortably among the branches, but when it descended, it could walk. Not gracefully, not like a human, but enough. Half in the trees, half on the ground, it was living between worlds. And then, about 4.4 million years ago, comes Ardipithecus ramidus, Ardi. Imagine her in the dappled light of a forest edge, small and delicate, moving carefully across the branches. Ardi could walk upright on the ground, though slowly, awkwardly, with feet still grasping like hands. She was not built for running, but for balance, a creature caught between 2 modes of life. She was neither the forest ape of the Miocene nor the groundwalker that humans would become. She was something in between, an in-between that lasted for over 1 million years. If you were to stand quietly at the edge of Ardi's forest, you would see her world. Patches of woodland opening into grassy plains, rivers cutting through wide valleys, herds of antelope moving across the grass, birds rising in great flocks. Danger always close, leopards watching from the trees, crocodiles waiting by the water. To survive here, you needed eyes that could see far, hands that could carry, legs that could move across shifting ground. Every step upright was a step toward survival. And so, across millions of years, the first hominins lived, died, and slowly changed. They were not on their way to becoming human. No creature ever knows its future. They were simply adapting, step by step, to their world. Yet in their bones, we see the first outlines of what would someday become us. Think of that. Small apes experimenting with standing tall. Their forests fading, their world demanding something new. Each one carrying a possibility that would echo through time. They did not know it, but in their fragile experiments, they were writing the opening lines of the human story. Pause with me here in the soft quiet of their world. The rustle of leaves in the wind, the sound of footsteps in dry grass, the quiet strength of a creature trying something new, something untested, walking upright, walking into the unknown. This is the dawn of the hominins, the first to balance between earth and sky, the first to lift themselves from the forest floor and step onto the open land. Their journey will continue across ages and landscapes, changing shape with every generation. And in time, their small, uncertain steps will lead to something vast, the slow unfolding of Homo sapiens. Lucy and the Australopithecines. Time continues its endless flow, and millions of years pass like ripples across a lake. From the shadowy beginnings of Artie and her kin, the hominin story grows bolder, more confident. The forests thin further, and the open grasslands stretch wider beneath the African sky. And in this changing world, new beings appear, beings who will leave clearer footprints on the path that leads to us. These are the Australopithecines. The name means southern apes, but they were more than apes. They were hominins, closer to us, their bodies and movements shaped for life on the ground. Imagine yourself standing on a sunlit plain of Africa about 3.5 million years ago. The grass sways with the wind, dotted by thorn trees, with mountains faint on the horizon. And there, moving across a land, you see a small figure. She is not tall, barely over a meter, but she strides upright, her hands free, her gaze scanning the horizon. Her name, as we call her now, is Lucy. Lucy belonged to a species known as Australopithecus afarensis, one of the most important ancestors in our story. Her skeleton was discovered in Ethiopia in 1974, and when scientists pieced her bones together, they revealed something extraordinary. Lucy walked like us. Her pelvis, her legs, her feet, all built for upright walking. She still had long arms for climbing trees and a small brain compared to ours, but her body told the truth. She was a walker, a traveler, a creature of the land. Picture her in life. The sun warms her dark skin as she moves across the plain, pausing to gather fruits, roots, or seeds. Her sharp eyes catch sight of movement in the grass, perhaps a predator lurking, and she keeps close to her group, for safety is found in numbers. They chatter softly, a mix of sounds, calls, and gestures. Not yet language, but communication enough to warn, to comfort, to share. Her children cling to her, watching, learning. Her world is dangerous, but she is well adapted. Keep whole voice in Enceladus. Lucy's species thrived for nearly 1 million years, spread across wide parts of Africa. They left behind bones, tools of nature, and most famously, footprints. In Tanzania, at a place called Laetoli, volcanic ash once blanketed the ground, soft as fresh snow. Into that ash, long ago, a small group of Australopithecines walked. When the ash hardened and preserved their steps, it captured a moment from nearly 3.6 million years ago. To this day, those footprints remain, the earliest direct evidence of upright walking. Imagine those small feet pressing into the ash, one step after another, across a quiet landscape. They walked just as we do now. Those footprints are echoes, still whispering to us across deep time. But Australopithecines were not one single species. They were a whole family of forms, each experimenting with survival. There was Australopithecus africanus in South Africa, whose rounder skull suggested a step closer to our brain shape. There was Australopithecus onamensis, older still, bridging the gap between Artie and Lucy. There was even the robust kind, with heavy jaws and teeth built for grinding tough plants. Each species tried its own path, some lasting hundreds of thousands of years, others fading quickly. They did not know they were part of a great story. They were simply living, adapting, struggling as every creature does. Think of the resilience they carried. For millions of years, they endured predators, saber-toothed cats, giant hyenas, crocodiles waiting by rivers. They endured droughts and floods, changing climates and landscapes. And yet they survived, step by step, generation by generation. With every footfall, with every child raised, they carried forward the fragile line of humanity. Now let your mind rest in their world. Hear the rustle of the savanna grass, the calls of distant birds, the low rumble of thunder gathering over the horizon. Picture Lucy and her kin walking together, upright, small but determined, their shadows stretching across the ancient earth. They do not know us, but we know them. They were among the first to leave marks on the land that still speak today. The Australopithecines were not humans, not yet, but in their steps, in their bones, in their quiet persistence, they opened the path we would one day walk. They are a bridge between ape and human, between forest and plain, between what was and what would be. So we pause here, with Lucy, with her family, with the footprints in volcanic ash. We pause to honor the long patience of evolution, the slow dance of adaptation, the countless lives lived in silence before the first words were ever spoken. From here, the journey grows more complex. For from among the Australopithecines, new shapes will emerge, beings with larger brains, cleverer hands, sharper minds. Soon, the first members of our own genus, Homo, will appear on the stage of history. But before we meet them, let us linger just a little longer with Lucy, walking steadily across the African plains, her footprints soft and small, yet carrying the weight of a story billions of years in the making. Keep whole voice in Enceladus. First sparks of the toolmaker. The sun rises over Africa once more, millions of years further along the timeline. The savannas stretch wider, the forests grow patchier, and the air itself feels drier, cooler, demanding more from those who live upon the land. For generations, the Australopithecines walked this world, their feet steady upon the soil, their lives measured in small groups, short lives, and endless struggles for survival. But evolution never stops, and now a new figure begins to appear on the stage. From among the Australopithecines, around 2.5 million years ago, emerges a creature unlike any before. Its brain is slightly larger, its face a little flatter, its hands more dexterous. Scientists would one day call it Homo habilis, the handyman. But in its own time, it was simply another being, trying to survive. Keep whole voice in Enceladus. Imagine this world. The grasslands ripple in the wind, dotted with herds of antelope and zebra, watched by prowling lions and saber-tooths. Rivers cut across the land, offering both life and danger. To live here, you needed more than strength. You needed cleverness, flexibility, the ability to solve problems in new ways. And that is what Homo habilis carried within its mind. Picture one now, small-bodied, perhaps just over a meter tall, standing at the edge of a riverbank. In its hand, it holds a stone, not just any stone, but one it has chipped, broken, sharpened. With careful strikes, it has made an edge sharp enough to slice, to scrape, to shape. This is not instinct. This is invention. The first stone tools have entered the story of life. These tools were simple, known to us now as the Oldowan industry. A hammerstone to strike, a core to chip away, flakes sharp as knives. Crude to our eyes, but revolutionary in their time. With these tools, Homo habilis could cut meat from carcasses left behind by predators, crack open bones for the rich marrow within, scrape hides to make them useful. For the first time, stone itself became an extension of the body, a way to reach beyond the limits of teeth and claws. And with tools came change. Diets shifted, more meat, more fat, more nutrients for growing brains. The hands that shaped stone grew skilled, precise. The minds that imagined new uses grew sharper, more inventive. The seeds of culture, of passing knowledge from one generation to the next, began to take root. Imagine a mother teaching her child how to strike a stone just right, how to choose one rock over another. These were the earliest lessons, the beginnings of tradition, of memory carried forward. Still, life was not easy. Homo habilis lived in a world of constant threat.
They were small, vulnerable, their lives short. But with tools, they found a new balance. They became scavengers, opportunists, survivors. Where others starved, they could scrape meat from the bones. Where others perished, they could adapt. Think about what this means. For millions of years, life had followed the same patterns: claws, teeth, strength, speed. But now, for the first time, survival depended not only on the body, but on the mind. The world had never seen such a creature before, one whose power lay not in muscle, but in imagination. The first sparks of what we call human had been struck. Sit quietly for a moment and picture them. Small groups gathered by the fireless plains, tools in hand, bones cracked open, children watching and learning. Their language was not yet our own, but perhaps their voices carried tones of warning, comfort, excitement. Their eyes shone with curiosity, with a flicker of recognition that the world could be shaped, altered, changed. This was the dawn of Homo. The Australopithecines had opened the path, but Homo habilis took the first steps toward the mind we recognize today. The first to shape stone, the first to teach, the first to bend the world to its will. And though they could not know it, their simple tools were the beginning of everything. From stone flakes to rockets, from chipped edges to written words, the story begins here, with hands striking stone in the quiet of an ancient savanna. Pause with me here, in this moment. The sound of stone on stone, the sharp crack, the ringing echo, the flake falling free. A small figure lifting it, testing its edge and smiling. Not in the way we smile, but in the satisfaction of survival. This is where humanity's true journey begins. Not with fire, not with speech, not with art, but with a stone held in hand.
The clock of deep time turns once more, and now we find ourselves about 1.9 million years ago. The savannas of Africa spread wide, rivers carve their way through open valleys, and volcanoes smolder on the horizon. Herds of animals thunder across the plains, antelope, elephants, giant beasts long vanished from our world. Among them, moving with new strength and confidence, comes a figure taller, leaner, more purposeful than any before. This is Homo erectus, the upright man. For the first time in our story, we meet a being who looks strikingly familiar. If one were to see Homo erectus walking in the distance, upright against the sky, you might almost mistake them for a modern human. Their legs are long and strong, built for endurance. Their bodies are lean, made not for short bursts, but for running, for walking across great distances under the burning sun. They no longer shuffle between trees and plains. They stride, they journey, they endure. Homo erectus is a landmark in evolution. With a brain nearly twice the size of Lucy's, they think in ways that reach beyond instinct. They craft tools not just of stone, but of new complexity. The Acheulean hand axe, tear-shaped, carefully shaped on both sides, sharp and versatile. These tools were not just struck from stone in haste, they were planned, envisioned, shaped with skill. In each axe, we see the growth of foresight, patience, and intention. And then, perhaps most profoundly, comes the moment that changed everything: fire. Imagine the scene. A storm rolls over the savanna, lightning strikes, and a tree bursts into flames. In the past, creatures would flee, but now Homo erectus approaches, cautious but curious. They carry branches lit with fire, keeping the embers alive. At night, flames crackle, pushing away the shadows, holding back predators. Around the fire, small groups gather, eating, watching, resting. And in the glow of those flames, something awakens. Fire is warmth. Fire is safety.
Fire is community. Think of what this meant. For the first time, night was no longer only danger and darkness. It became a place of gathering. Food could be cooked, making it softer, richer in nutrients. Stomachs grew smaller, brains grew larger. Fire reshaped the body, the diet, the life of Homo erectus. It reshaped the rhythm of the day itself, dividing time into day and night, light and shadow, work and rest. Around those ancient fires, the seeds of culture were sown.
But Homo erectus was not bound to one place. They were wanderers, restless and resilient. From Africa, they began to spread, farther than any hominin before them. Fossils and tools tell us they reached into Asia, into Indonesia, into Europe. Across rivers, mountains, deserts, and seas, they carried their tools, their fire, their families. They were the first true global travelers of our lineage, leaving Africa long before our own species would. Picture their world. In Java, they move through steaming forests. In China, they wander cool valleys where rivers run. In the Middle East, they walk across stony deserts, hand axes gleaming in the sun. They adapt to every land they enter, strong bodies carrying them mile after mile, generation after generation. They are not lost, they are exploring. And in their journeys, they prove something essential, that humans were never meant to stay still. We were made to roam. Sit with this thought. For nearly 2 million years, Homo erectus thrived, longer than our own species has yet existed. They endured ice ages and droughts, volcanic eruptions and floods. They watched landscapes rise and vanish. And through it all, they survived, their fire burning. And perhaps, if you listen closely enough, you can still imagine their voices around the flames. Not words as we know them, but sounds, gestures, laughter, cries. The beginnings of language stirring in the dark. Mothers teaching children how to strike a hand axe. Fathers watching for predators in the night. Small groups huddled close, sharing warmth, sharing safety, sharing something that was beginning to look very much like us. Homo erectus was not just a survivor. They were a pioneer. The first to master fire. The first to spread across continents. The first to walk with the confidence of a body built for endurance. They were the torchbearers of our story, holding the flame for nearly 2 million years, until one day they would pass it on. So we pause here with the wanderers, watch them stride across the horizon, their shadows long in the evening sun. Watch the sparks rise from their fire into the starry night. Their journey is not ours, not yet, but without them, our journey could never have begun. Homo heidelbergensis, the hunters of the open world. Time rolls forward once more, and the Earth reshapes itself in great breaths of climate and change. The age of Homo erectus is long and enduring, but eventually new forms begin to rise from their lineage. Around 700,000 years ago, a new figure steps onto the stage, taller, broader, with minds more intricate, with tools more refined. These are Homo heidelbergensis. If Homo habilis was the toolmaker and Homo erectus the firekeeper and wanderer, then Homo heidelbergensis is the hunter and the builder. They carry forward the gifts of their ancestors, upright bodies, clever hands, endurance. But now those gifts sharpen into something new. Their brains are larger, nearly reaching the size of our own. Their tools are no longer just simple axes and flakes. They shape wood into spears. They hunt in groups. They build shelters. They are, for the first time, engineers of their survival. Imagine standing in their world. The air is cool, for ice ages come and go across these centuries. Vast herds of animals roam. Mammoths with curved tusks, woolly rhinoceroses, bison, wild horses. And scattered across the plains and forests, small bands of Homo heidelbergensis move with purpose. In their hands are wooden spears, hardened in fire, tipped with stone. Together, they surround a deer, a horse, perhaps even a mammoth. Voices rise. Not yet our words, but sounds and calls that signal strategy, that bind them together. Then, in sudden bursts, the spears fly. The hunt begins. This was new. Other hominins scavenged, waited for predators to leave scraps behind, cracked bones for marrow. But Homo heidelbergensis hunted. They planned, cooperated, worked as one. Their survival depended on each other, and in that reliance grew bonds of trust, of connection, of community. Perhaps in those hunts, in the thrill of success and the grief of failure, the first outlines of true human emotion began to deepen. But they did not only hunt, they built. Unlike their ancestors, who sought only caves and branches for shelter, Homo heidelbergensis began to create their own. Simple huts of wood, stone, and grass rose against the cold winds. Fires burned within them. Families gathered inside, safe, warm, fed. For the first time, humans were not only adapting to the world, they were reshaping it.
Pause with me here. Picture a small group sitting in their shelter. The fire glows orange, sparks rising into the smoke hole above. A child plays with a piece of flint, watching how its edges glint in the light. An elder shapes a spear, the motions practiced, careful. Outside, the night wind howls, predators prowl. But here, within these fragile walls, there is safety, there is family, there is the echo of something we recognize as home. From Homo heidelbergensis would come many futures. In Africa, they would give rise to Homo sapiens, our species. In Europe, they would become the Neanderthals, powerful and intelligent in their own right. In Asia, perhaps they left descendants we are only beginning to discover. They are a crossroads in our lineage, the great branching point of human history. And yet, they did not know this. They were simply living, day to day, season to season, hunt to hunt. They felt the sting of cold air, the hunger of an empty stomach, the relief of fire, the joy of companionship. In their lives, they were not thinking of the future, but in their existence, they carried the seeds of all who would come after. Sit with that for a moment. Hear the crackle of fire, the muffled breath of people huddled close. Imagine their eyes shining in the glow, reflections dancing like stars. These are our ancestors, not shadows, not myths, but real people who lived, who walked, who loved, who feared. They are the link between the wanderers of the past and the thinkers of the future. Homo heidelbergensis were not yet storytellers, but they were builders, hunters, and pioneers of human cooperation. Their shelters, their spears, their fires, these were the foundations upon which our species would someday rise. And so we leave them here, in the chill of the Ice Age night, their fires glowing against the dark. Their voices echo in the distance, their spears rest against the walls, their families huddle close. They cannot know what waits millions of years ahead, but they are already part of the great unfolding. The story is deepening. The path of Homo sapiens draws nearer. Neanderthals, the firekeepers of the Ice Age. The Earth changes again. The air grows sharper, colder. Ice sheets expand across Europe and Asia, vast rivers of frozen time pushing down from the north. Forests shrink, plains stretch wide, and herds of mighty animals roam. Mammoths, aurochs, reindeer, woolly rhinoceroses. It is an unforgiving world, a land carved by frost and silence. And in this cold, a new kind of human rises, the Neanderthals. For thousands of years, they lived and thrived in this icy world. Their bodies were built for survival here, shorter, stronger, with broad chests and powerful limbs that kept in warmth. Their faces carried heavy brows and strong jaws, their noses wide to warm the air before it reached their lungs. They were not fragile, They were not primitive. They were perfectly shaped for their world. Picture them moving through a snowy forest, furs wrapped tightly around them. In their hands, finely crafted stone tools and wooden spears hardened in fire. They tracked animals with patience, reading the faintest print in the snow, the subtle bend of grass. A small band surrounds a reindeer. In coordinated silence, they close in. Then, with a sudden burst of movement, the spears strike, and the hunt is done. For Neanderthals, survival was art, a careful balance of strength, skill, and cooperation. But the Neanderthals were more than hunters. Around their fires, they shared warmth, food, and bonds that stretched beyond mere survival. They cared for their sick, tended to their elders, and even buried their dead. Imagine that for a moment. A cold cave, a flickering fire, and a body carefully placed in the earth. Flowers may have been scattered, tools left beside them. It was not just disposal, it was ritual, respect, remembrance. These were not beasts, they were humans with tenderness in their hearts. Their tools were complex, their hands skilled. They shaped scrapers, blades, and points with precision. They tanned hides to make clothing. They built shelters, sometimes even weaving branches into domes, insulating them against the winter winds. And they painted. Faint traces of pigment found on cave walls whisper of an inner world, of imagination, of symbolic thought. For a long time, we believed they were dull and brutish, but slowly the truth unfolds. Neanderthals were thinkers, dreamers, caretakers. And perhaps, if you listen closely, you can imagine their voices. We may never know exactly what their speech was like, but evidence suggests they had the anatomy for language, for sounds beyond simple calls. Did they share stories around the fire, tales of the hunt, of ancestors, of the stars? Did they sing, chant, whisper comfort to their children in the long nights of winter? These questions drift unanswered, but they remind us that Neanderthals were not so different from us. For thousands upon thousands of years, Neanderthals thrived. They survived ice ages, adapted to the harshest of climates, and left their mark across Europe and Western Asia. They were not a brief flicker in history. They endured for over 300,000 years, far longer than Homo sapiens has existed so far. And then, one day, we arrived. Homo sapiens began to step into their world, migrating out of Africa, spreading across the globe. For a time, the two species lived side by side. They may have traded, shared knowledge, perhaps even gazed at each other across the firelight. And in some moments, they joined together more closely than we once believed. Today, in the DNA of almost every non-African person on Earth, there are traces of Neanderthals, fragments of their story written into our blood. They are not gone. They live in us still. Yet, slowly, the Neanderthals faded. Perhaps it was climate change, shrinking their food sources. Perhaps it was the pressure of our growing populations. Perhaps, in the end, they simply merged into us, piece by piece, until their identity disappeared, but their essence endured. Whatever the reason, by around 40,000 years ago, their fires burned no more. The last of the Neanderthals vanished into silence. But do not think of them as failures or as shadows to our brilliance. Think of them as kin, resilient, intelligent, deeply human. For hundreds of thousands of years, they lived in balance with their world, and they left behind more than bones and tools. They left us the reminder that humanity has never been a single story, but a chorus, many voices shaping the song of our species. So tonight, let us honor them. Close your eyes and picture their fires glowing against the ice, their voices echoing in caves, their hands leaving marks on stone walls that still endure. They were not others. They were part of us. They always will be. The dawn of Homo sapiens, the dreamers of Africa. Let us turn the page again, dear traveler of time. We leave behind the icy forests of Europe and the firelit caves of the Neanderthals, and we move south, far south to a land where warmth still lingers, where the sun casts gold across savannas, deserts, and coastlines. Here, in Africa, the cradle of all our beginnings, another form of human is rising. Not yet many, not yet powerful, but slowly, steadily, they take their first steps into the world. These are Homo sapiens, us. Around 300,000 years ago, in what is now Morocco, the first Homo sapiens appeared. Their bones were slender compared to their Neanderthal cousins, their faces flatter, their skulls rounder, their brains organized differently. They were not giants of strength, nor masters of the frozen north. They were fragile, vulnerable, easily threatened by hunger, disease, and predators. But they carried something else, something subtle, something hidden within their minds. They carried imagination.
Picture the world they entered. Africa then was a land of vast variety. Sweeping grasslands filled with gazelles and antelope, dense forests alive with birdsong, shifting deserts, and glittering coastlines rich with shellfish and fish. Lions roamed, hyenas laughed in the dark, crocodiles slid silently through rivers. And into this world came small bands of Homo sapiens, no more than a few dozen at a time, their numbers so few they could have vanished entirely. Each band moved together, bound by blood, by trust, by the need to survive. Their tools at first were not so different from those of their ancestors. They shaped stone flakes into blades, axes, scrapers. They sharpened wooden spears. But slowly, changes emerged. Their tools became more refined, more varied. A flake shaped not only to cut, but to pierce, to carve, to craft. Tiny innovations, almost invisible in their time, but together they formed a quiet revolution. Yet tools were only part of their story. Look closer at their lives. Around their fires, something remarkable was happening. Their voices carried not just calls or warnings, but words, symbols for objects, for feelings, for ideas. With language came memory, and with memory came storytelling. A hunt could be retold, a danger described, a plan whispered in the dark. With words, the past could be remembered and the future imagined. This was something no other species had ever truly mastered. Neanderthals had complex communication, yes, but in sapiens, language blossomed into infinite possibilities. With words, they could bind together more tightly than any other animal. They could cooperate not just in the moment, but across generations. They could build culture. Imagine one such night. A fire flickers under the open sky. Stars burn cold and ancient above. Children huddle close to their mothers, their eyes wide, listening. An elder speaks, their voice steady, telling of the rivers, of the animals, of the dangers hidden in the shadows. Perhaps even then, they began to tell stories that stretched beyond the immediate. Tales of spirits, of ancestors, of the unknown sky. The first seeds of myth, of belief, of wonder. And here is the heart of Homo sapiens. Not strength, not size, not speed, but the ability to dream, to imagine what does not exist, to picture what might be. It is imagination that allowed them to shape tools more carefully, to see the spear before it was carved, to envision the hunt before it began. It is imagination that gave them hope when food was scarce, that gave them rituals to honor the dead, that gave them the courage to face tomorrow. But life was not easy. Africa, though rich, was also harsh. Climate shifted again and again, rains failing, deserts spreading, then greening once more. Entire groups may have vanished, their lines cut short by famine or disease. For a time, our species teetered on the edge of extinction, reduced to only a few thousand individuals. Think of that, the whole of humanity, everything we are today, narrowed to a fragile thread, a single flame nearly snuffed out by the winds of time. And yet, that flame endured. Across coastlines, they gathered shellfish, learning to harvest the sea. Along rivers, they learned to fish, crafting bone points to catch what stone alone could not.
They painted their bodies with ochre, bright red against brown skin, perhaps as ornament, perhaps as ritual, perhaps as a way to say, "We are here, we belong, we are human."
In these quiet beginnings, the foundations of our species were laid. Not yet the builders of cities, not yet the makers of art or music as we know it, but already the dreamers. Already the ones who could look at the night sky and wonder. Already the ones who could see not only what is, but what could be. Let us pause here with them. Picture the firelight against dark skin, sparks rising into the night. Hear the murmur of voices, not just sounds, but words, meaning, memory. Smell the smoke, the roasted meat, the faint tang of ochre. These are our ancestors, fragile but resilient, small but destined for greatness. They did not know what they were beginning. They could not know that one day their descendants would spread across the earth, build cities of stone and steel, touch the moon, peer into the stars. But it all began here, in Africa, with small bands of Homo sapiens clinging to survival, guided by imagination, bound by words, sustained by fire and by each other. This is our dawn, our fragile beginning, the first breath of a species that would change the world. The first great journeys, leaving Africa. The dawn of Homo sapiens had been fragile, a flickering flame struggling to stay alive. For tens of thousands of years, our ancestors clung to the coasts and rivers of Africa, moving with the seasons, surviving famine and drought. And yet, despite all odds, they endured. But soon, the world beyond Africa called to them, vast, unknown, dangerous. A call not of words, but of hunger, curiosity, and quiet courage. Around 100,000 years ago, the first small bands began to leave Africa. Not many, just tiny groups, families, wanderers, setting out across the Sinai, moving along the Arabian Peninsula, following rivers and coastlines. They did not know where they were going. They only knew that water, food, and shelter lay ahead, somewhere. And so they walked, always walking, step by step, into the unknown. Picture them against a backdrop of endless desert, sand stretching out, heat shimmering in the air. But ahead, an oasis, a river, the cool shimmer of the sea. They followed the shorelines, gathering shellfish, crabs, seaweed. The ocean became their ally, offering food in times when the land gave little. With sharpened bone and stone, they fished. With fire, they roasted their catch. Always they moved, never staying too long in one place. The journey was not only one of survival, but of adaptation. Each new land tested them, shaped them. In the Middle East, they encountered forests and plains, rich with deer, gazelle, wild cattle. They learned new hunts, new strategies. In Asia, vast rivers carved the land, monsoons drenched the soil, strange plants and animals filled the forests. Every step outward was a test, and every test changed them. But they were not alone in this new world. Other humans walked the earth. Neanderthals roamed Europe. Denisovans lived in Asia. Perhaps even other, now lost cousins lingered in the shadows. Imagine that moment when two bands of humans, different but so similar, came face to face across a riverbank or a forest clearing. Were they fearful? Did they fight? Did they trade? Did they share firelight, stories, or even kinship? We know now that they did more than meet. They mingled. Their blood flowed into ours. Their DNA still whispers in our cells. The journey outward was not conquest alone. It was mingling, connection, exchange.
Still, the journey was dangerous. Many groups vanished. Droughts and storms destroyed paths, predators stalked the weak, hunger followed every step. There were times when it seemed humanity might vanish completely, extinguished by the very risks it dared to take. And yet, always, some survived. They pressed onward, driven by something deep, something that has never left us, the desire to see what lies beyond the horizon. By 70,000 years ago, waves of migration spread further. Across India, sapiens walked the coasts, gathering shellfish, shaping tools of remarkable fineness. Some moved inland through forests and highlands. And then, in time, they reached Southeast Asia, lush, humid, filled with strange cries of birds and insects. Here, they adapted again, learning to fish rivers teeming with life, to gather fruits and roots unknown in Africa. And then they did something astonishing. They crossed water. In rafts of reeds or wood, guided by nothing but the stars and instinct, they reached islands that had never known humans before. By 65,000 years ago, sapiens stood on the shores of Australia. Think of that! From Africa to Australia, across deserts, mountains, forests, seas. An impossible journey, and yet they made it.
With each step, our ancestors carried something invisible but powerful: imagination. The ability to plan beyond the moment, to picture a journey before it began, to dream of what might be waiting ahead. This imagination gave them courage to leave safety behind. It gave them songs to carry in their hearts, myths to explain the unknown, rituals to bind their bands together. The migrations were not fast, they were not sudden. They unfolded over tens of thousands of years, like rivers slowly carving valleys, patient, unstoppable. Children were born along the journey, grew and died without ever seeing the land their ancestors left behind. For them, the journey was life itself. The world opened slowly, and humanity spread like water, finding its way into every crack, every corner of the earth. Pause here and imagine the night sky as they saw it. A family gathered around a fire on the Arabian coast, waves breaking gently on the shore. They look up at the stars, the same stars we see tonight, and they wonder. They point, they gesture, they give the stars names in their own ancient tongue. Perhaps they imagine the sky is filled with spirits, or ancestors, or animals of power. In that moment, we are connected to them. Their eyes on the stars are our eyes, their wonder, our wonder.
And so, from Africa, humanity began its great outward journey. Across deserts and forests, seas and mountains, they spread. Not swiftly, not easily, but with patience, courage, and dreams. The earth was no longer just the cradle of our birth. It was becoming our canvas. Each step a brushstroke, each migration a story written into the soil. Into the land of ice and shadows, Homo sapiens in Europe. The winds of time carried us further. From the warm coasts of Africa, across deserts and rivers, through forests and grasslands, humanity moved, always following the trails of animals, the flow of rivers, the pull of curiosity. And then, around 45,000 years ago, a new horizon appeared before them, a land colder, harsher, and filled with challenges unlike any they had known before. This was Europe, the land of ice and shadows, where mammoths roamed, where herds of bison stampeded across frozen plains, where Neanderthals had already made their homes for hundreds of millennia. Imagine the first bands of Homo sapiens stepping into this landscape. The air sharper, filled with the bite of frost, the nights longer, the cold settling deep into bone. They were not prepared in the way Neanderthals were. Their bodies were slimmer, less insulated against the chill. But they carried other gifts: adaptability, creativity, and imagination. These gifts would allow them to survive where others might falter. And here, for the first time, two species of humans stood face to face. Picture it, a Neanderthal hunter moving through a snowy forest, his heavy brows shadowing sharp eyes, a spear in hand. Across the clearing, a group of sapiens gather, their fire crackling, their voices murmuring in strange rhythms. Did they see each other with fear, with curiosity? Did they approach, hands open, offering gifts of flint, meat, or shells? Or did they turn to violence, two species defending the same ground? The truth may be a mixture of all of these. What we do know is that the meeting was not just conflict, there was connection. For within our DNA today, traces of Neanderthal blood still flow. This means that somewhere, long ago, love, or perhaps survival, crossed the boundary between species. Children were born who carried the strength of both lineages. Those children lived, grew, and passed on their blood. And so, even today, the Neanderthals live on within us. But the meeting was more than blood. It was also exchange of knowledge. Perhaps sapiens learned from Neanderthals how to survive the deep cold, how to choose the best caves, how to shape hides into warm coverings, how to stalk reindeer through snowy forests. And perhaps the Neanderthals learned from sapiens too, how to craft new tools, how to weave ornaments, how to paint symbols upon stone. In this mingling, two kinds of humans shared not only land, but fragments of their humanity.
Europe became a stage of great innovation. Sapiens brought with them tools more refined than any seen before. Long, slender blades struck from stone cores, bone needles that pierced hides, awls that stitched garments. They began to craft ornaments from shells and ivory, necklaces and beads that had no purpose for survival alone, but spoke of identity, of beauty, of belonging. Here, in the coldest of lands, they carried with them warmth of a different kind, culture. And then came the art. In the deep caves of France and Spain, humans left behind something astonishing. Paintings of animals so vivid, so alive, that even now, thousands of years later, they take our breath away. Horses galloping in ochre and charcoal, bison charging across the walls, hands outlined in red. These were not idle doodles. They were symbols, expressions, stories painted into stone. Imagine standing in those caves, a torch flickering, shadows dancing over the walls, and seeing the animals leap alive in firelight. This was imagination turned into permanence, a way to speak across time. But life in Europe was not only art and wonder, it was survival. Winters stretched long and merciless. Food was scarce. Predators were everywhere. Cave lions, hyenas, wolves. Each day required courage and cunning. Yet somehow, sapiens thrived. They traveled in bands, supported each other, and adapted faster than any species before them. Their minds found solutions where others saw only obstacles. And slowly, the balance began to shift. Neanderthals, once the masters of this land, began to fade. Perhaps it was the changing climate, perhaps it was competition for food. Perhaps it was the smaller, more fragile networks of their families, while sapiens formed larger, more connected groups. By around 40,000 years ago, the Neanderthals were gone, their last fires extinguished. And in their place, sapiens remained, carrying forward not only their own traditions, but also whispers of those who came before. Pause here, in that cold European night. A group of sapiens huddles near the fire, furs wrapped tight, their children asleep beside them. Above, the stars blaze clear and bright, the same stars the Neanderthals once gazed at. The caves nearby hold their art, their hands pressed against stone, their voices echoing in silence. The Neanderthals are gone, but not forgotten. They remain in our blood, in our memories, in our shared humanity. The story of Europe was not simply one of replacement, but of merging. One humanity blending into another until the lines blurred and only sapiens remained to tell the story. And with them, the Earth began to change more quickly than ever before. For these were not just survivors, they were dreamers, artists, and thinkers. They carried fire in their hands and visions in their minds. And soon, they would carry their footsteps even further, into every corner of the world. The first artists, the first dreamers. The story of humanity was never only about fire and hunger. From the very beginning, our ancestors carried within them a need not only to live, but to express, to make meaning from the silence, to leave traces of their presence behind.
And now, around 40,000 years ago, this need began to blossom into something new. We call it the cultural explosion, but to those who lived it, it was simply life unfolding in richer colors. Picture the scene. Deep within a cave, the air cool and still, a torch held in a steady hand. The light flickers across walls of stone, and there a figure kneels, brush in hand, grinding ochre and charcoal into pigment. Slowly, carefully, they paint. Horses run across the stone, their flanks curved, their legs stretched mid-gallop. A bison lowers its head, powerful, immense. Hands press against the wall, leaving red outlines, as if to say, "I was here, we were here." These were not idle drawings, they were expressions of something deeper, perhaps ritual, perhaps memory, perhaps magic. To paint the hunt might be to summon its success. To place one's hand on stone might be to reach across time, binding one generation to the next. The caves became sanctuaries of spirit, where imagination spilled onto walls that still carry it tens of thousands of years later.
But art was not only on stone, it was also in sound. Flutes made from bird bone and mammoth ivory have been found, their delicate holes carved with care. Imagine a group gathered at night, the firelight flickering and a flute's soft notes rising into the dark. The first music, not for survival, not for food, not for fire, but for beauty, for feeling, for joy. Voices may have joined, chanting, humming, singing. Rhythm echoed against cave walls. And for the first time, the silence of the world was filled with music born from human breath. Adornment, too, became part of life. Shells pierced to make necklaces. Teeth and bones strung into pendants. Ivory carved into beads. Bodies painted with ochre and charcoal. Each ornament spoke not just of survival, but of identity. Perhaps it marked belonging to a group, a bond of kinship. Perhaps it was a way to charm spirits or to honor the dead. Or perhaps, like us, they simply found beauty in shining shells and carved ivory. And with art and ornament came ritual. Burials became more deliberate, more careful. Graves lined with ochre, tools placed beside the body, beads resting on the chest. It was not only death, but remembrance. The living carrying the dead into another realm, honoring them, perhaps hoping for their guidance or presence beyond the grave. In these rituals, we see the stirrings of spirituality, the sense that life was more than what the eye could see.
Think for a moment what this means. A species that once only cracked bones for marrow now painted walls with visions of animals. A people who once scattered their dead now buried them with care. A band who once only shared meat now shared music, necklaces, symbols. This is not just survival, this is culture. Fragile, delicate, but alive. And within this flowering, something even greater took shape, the strengthening of community. For art, music, and ritual were not private, they were shared. A song needed listeners. A painting needed witnesses. A burial needed mourners. These acts bound groups together, gave them shared stories, shared beliefs, shared identities. And in that sharing, humanity's strength grew. Alone, a human was fragile. Together, bound by symbols and songs, they were unbreakable. Pause here. Imagine a night on the steppe, the cold air sharp, stars blazing overhead. A group gathers around a fire. A flute plays, voices rise, hands beat a rhythm on stretched hides. Children laugh, elders sway. Beyond the firelight, darkness presses in. Wolves prowl, winds moan. But here, within the circle of music and flame, there is warmth, there is safety, there is humanity, alive in its fullest sense.
This was the true gift of Homo sapiens. Not only tools sharper than before, not only the courage to migrate across seas and deserts. The gift was imagination, made visible, made audible, made eternal. The gift was culture.
And from this flowering would come everything else: myth, religion, art, music, the countless expressions that make us who we are. Humanity was no longer only surviving. Humanity was beginning to dream together.
Fire and frost, surviving the Ice Age. The Earth was cold. Vast sheets of ice stretched across continents, glittering white beneath pale skies. Winds swept down from the frozen caps, biting, merciless, carrying with them the chill of endless winter. To us, it would feel unbearable, but for tens of thousands of years, this was the world in which our ancestors lived. The Ice Age was not a single, unbroken freeze. It came in waves, glacial periods advancing, then retreating. Yet for Homo sapiens, it was always a test. The cold was not just an inconvenience, it was a constant threat to survival. Imagine yourself standing on a tundra 30,000 years ago. The horizon is vast and empty. No trees, no shelter, only open plains swept with snow. Herds of mammoths, woolly rhinoceroses, and reindeer move slowly across the distance. They are the lifeblood of the people who follow them. Food, hides, bones, sinew. But reaching them is dangerous. To hunt them requires courage, skill, and teamwork. To fail means hunger.
In this frozen world, the body was vulnerable. Fire became more than warmth, it became life itself. Each spark struck from stone carried with it survival. A fire ring in a cave or a hut was not simply flame. It was protection from frostbite, from predators, from the endless night. Around its glow, families gathered, warming their hands, drying their furs, roasting their meat. The fire's crackle was the heartbeat of survival. Clothing, too, became innovation. Earlier humans may have wrapped themselves in hides, but sapiens mastered the art of tailoring. Needles carved from bones stitched together hides and furs into fitted garments. Boots lined with fur, cloaks layered thick, mittens tied with sinew. These were the armor against the ice. The very act of sewing was survival through ingenuity. Shelter was no less essential. Caves offered safety, but they were not always near. So humans built. Mammoth bones were arranged into frames, covered with hides to form domes. Snow itself could be shaped into barriers against the wind. Over time, portable shelters emerged, the ancestors of tents, allowing groups to follow the herds across frozen lands. Wherever they went, sapiens carried home with them. But survival was not only physical. The Ice Age demanded cooperation. A single hunter could not bring down a mammoth. A lone family could not endure long winters. Bands grew larger, bound by shared hunts, shared fires, shared songs. Within the struggle, humanity learned the deeper strength of community. They hunted together, feasted together, mourned together. This unity was as important as fur or fire. And even here, in the harshest of conditions, art continued. Caves like Chauvet and Lascaux were not painted during warm summers only. Many were adorned in the depth of Ice Age winters. Imagine the scene, a frozen landscape outside, and deep within, the flickering torchlight revealing images of galloping horses, mighty bison, and lions prowling across stone. Why paint when survival was so fragile? Because meaning itself was survival. The act of creating beauty gave hope, gave purpose, gave identity. Music, too, continued. Flutes carved from bird bones echoed inside icy caves, filling them with sound. In the stillness of the glacial world, music was warmth for the spirit. It was a reminder that even in the bleakest cold, humanity carried within it a fire of its own.
Consider the resilience of these ancestors. Against hunger, they invented new tools. Against cold, they crafted new clothes. Against despair, they created art and music. Every hardship became a seed for creativity. Every obstacle, a spark for innovation. This is what set Homo sapiens apart. And so they endured, step by step, Generation by generation, they crossed frozen valleys, climbed snow-swept ridges, followed the herds across icy rivers. They adapted, survived, and thrived, carrying with them not only their bodies, but their dreams, their songs, their shared humanity. The Ice Age could not break them. Instead, it shaped them. It honed their resilience, sharpened their minds, deepened their bonds. Out of fire and frost, a stronger humanity was forged.
The Great Wanderers, Journeys Across Continents. The story of our species has always been one of movement. Even in the earliest days, long before there were maps or written words, Homo sapiens carried within them a pull, a quiet whisper that urged them forward. The earth was wide, the horizons endless, and the heart of humanity longed to see what lay beyond. By now, the people of Africa had endured much. They had faced droughts, rains, predators, and the long winters of the Ice Age. They had learned to clothe themselves, to build shelters, to hunt the great beasts of the plains. They had painted caves and sung songs into the night. They were survivors, but more than that, they were dreamers. And so, step by step, they began to leave the cradle of their birth. The first great journeys took them along familiar paths, across savannas and river valleys, through deserts and forests. Slowly, bands of sapiens reached the edges of Africa and began to cross into new lands. Imagine standing on the shores of the Red Sea or the Sinai Peninsula, gazing across the water to the hazy outline of another land. To cross meant uncertainty, perhaps even death, and yet they crossed. Some by land bridges exposed by lower seas, others perhaps by rafts, fragile and simple, guided by courage.
Into the Middle East they came, finding new rivers and new climates. Some followed the fertile valleys of the Tigris and Euphrates. Others pressed into the grassy steppes. Each step was a gamble, yet each step carried them farther. The Great Migration was not one journey, but countless journeys, repeated across generations. Parents traveled with children, elders carried memories, hunters carried tools. The earth became a vast network of paths traced by human feet. Through Asia they spread, adapting to every new challenge. Forests stretched thick and green, filled with strange creatures. Cold mountains rose, demanding resilience and invention. Vast deserts shimmered under brutal suns. And through it all, sapiens walked. They carried fire in their hands and hope in their hearts. Pause for a moment and imagine this world, not yet divided by nations, not yet mapped by lines and borders. It was raw and untamed, full of danger and wonder. To walk into such a world required courage, but also imagination. These early travelers must have wondered, what lies beyond that mountain, beyond that river, beyond that sea? And step by step, they found out. But the journey did not stop there. Across Central Asia, other bands pressed northward. They braved the freezing winds of Siberia, following herds of mammoth and reindeer. They crossed frozen rivers, built shelters of bone and hide, wrapped themselves in furs. Some stood at the edge of the Bering Land Bridge, the strip of earth that once linked Asia to North America, and crossed into a new continent. For the first time, humans set foot in lands no primate before them had ever walked. When they arrived, they stepped into a world unlike any they had ever known. Australia was a land of marsupials, kangaroos bounding across plains, wombats burrowing in earth, koalas clinging to eucalyptus. Giant creatures roamed then, the diprotodon, larger than a rhinoceros, the thunderbird, a massive flightless bird towering over humans. This was a place of strangeness and wonder, a world apart. And still, sapiens adapted. They learned the plants, hunted the beasts, painted the rocks with ochre in images that still endure today. When they arrived, they stepped into a world unlike any they had ever known.
Australia was a land of marsupials, kangaroos bounding across plains, wombats burrowing in earth, koalas clinging to eucalyptus. Giant creatures roamed then, the diprotodon, larger than a rhinoceros, the thunderbird, a massive flightless bird towering over humans. This was a place of strangeness and wonder, a world apart. And still, sapiens adapted. They learned the plants, hunted the beasts, painted the rocks with ochre in images that still endure today. When they arrived, they stepped into a world unlike any they had ever known. Australia was a land of marsupials, kangaroos bounding across plains, wombats burrowing in earth, koalas clinging to eucalyptus. Giant creatures roamed then, the diprotodon, larger than a rhinoceros, the thunderbird, a massive flightless bird towering over humans. This was a place of strangeness and wonder, a world apart. And still, sapiens adapted. They learned the plants, hunted the beasts, painted the rocks with ochre in images that still endure today.
Imagine the awe. Forests of towering redwoods, vast plains filled with bison, mountains capped with snow, and animals unlike any they had known. Saber-toothed cats with fangs like daggers, ground sloths taller than houses, herds of mastodons moving like giants across valleys. The people who entered these lands became pioneers of a new world. This was humanity's greatest gift, adaptability. In deserts, they found ways to gather water. In forests, they carved tools from wood. In tundras, they stitched clothes from hides. Wherever they went, they carried their fire, their songs, their memories, and their dreams. And each new land, each new horizon became part of the human story. Think, too, of what this meant for the heart of humanity. Each migration carried not only survival, but imagination. They told stories of the lands they left, of the stars that guided them, of the spirits that walked with them. Children grew up hearing tales of ancestors who braved seas, mountains, and storms. These stories became myths, passed from fire to fire, shaping culture and identity. So humanity spread, from Africa into Asia, from Asia into Australia, from Siberia into the Americas. The Earth was no longer the home of a few bands, but the canvas of an entire species. And all of it was done without maps, without cities, without kingdoms. Only with fire, memory, courage, and imagination. Pause now and imagine the Earth of that time. A world without fences, without borders, without nations. Only rivers and seas, forests and plains, mountains and deserts. And slowly, across this vast world, small fires burned in the night. Each fire the heart of a human band. Each fire a spark of survival, of hope, of dreaming. Step by step, continent by continent, those fires spread, until the whole world glowed with the warmth of humanity. This was not yet the end of the journey, but the beginning of our true global story. The great wanderers had become the first explorers of Earth. And everywhere they went, they carried with them the seed of what would come next. Stories, culture, connection. Humanity had stepped out of Africa, and now it would never stop walking.
Many worlds, one humanity. By the time Homo sapiens had carried their fires to every corner of the world, the Earth had become a vast, living mosaic of human life. From the frozen tundras of the north to the steaming jungles of the tropics, from arid deserts to fertile valleys, humans now stood everywhere. And with each new place, humanity became something slightly different, shaped by the land, the climate, the food, the challenges, and the dreams of that place. Think first of the northern tundra, where winter stretched endlessly and the sun sometimes refused to rise. Here, humans learned to live with snow as their constant companion. They stitched thick fur garments, learned to follow the migrations of reindeer and caribou, and crafted sleds to move across frozen ground. Their skin grew paler over generations, an adaptation to gather what little sunlight there was. Their myths spoke of endless nights and spirits of ice, and their fires burned as circles of warmth against the vast cold.
Now shift your gaze to the tropics, where dense forests rose like green cathedrals, vines tangled thick, and life buzzed with insects, birds, and beasts. Here, humans became gatherers of fruit, hunters of smaller prey, and crafters of wooden tools. The air was warm and wet, heavy with scent, and people walked with fewer coverings, their bodies adjusting to the heat. Over time, their skin deepened in tone, a shield against the relentless sun. Their stories echoed with the voices of animals, their dances imitating the movements of birds, their drums echoing the rhythms of rain. And in the deserts, where water was scarce and the land shimmered with heat, sapiens carved a different way of life. They learned to read the stars as maps, to move across sand dunes with precision, to store water, to make use of every plant and animal. Their lives were marked by patience, by endurance. Songs carried across the dunes, and myths were born of mirages, of spirits that moved with the shifting sands. Everywhere, humans were reshaped by their environments, not only physically, but culturally, spiritually, imaginatively. In high mountains, they learned to breathe thin air and found gods in the peaks. In wide grasslands, they sang of the endless sky and hunted beasts that ran like the wind. In coastal lands, they built boats, fished with nets, and learned to read the tides. Every land demanded something new, and every human band answered with creativity.
And with this came something else: diversity. Generations passed, and humans began to look slightly different from one another. Skin shades shifted to match the sun, eyes narrowed or widened, hair curled or straightened. Bodies grew taller or shorter, depending on food, climate, and need. Slowly, the outward appearance of sapiens reflected the great range of Earth's environments. But inside, they remained the same: dreamers, singers, fire builders, story keepers. One species, many forms. Language, too, began to multiply. Where once a single tongue may have united, now hundreds began to blossom. Each group carried with it its own words, shaped by the land they knew. In the forests, words for leaves and birds filled the air. In the tundra, words for snow and ice multiplied endlessly. In deserts, the stars were named, guiding paths across the sand. Language became not just survival, but identity. To speak was to belong, to carry the memory of ancestors in sound. Pause and imagine it. A world alive with countless voices, fires burning in every corner of the earth, each circle speaking its own tongue, singing its own song, telling its own story. Yet all of them human, all of them sharing laughter, grief, hunger, love, and hope.
With diversity came exchange. Groups met at the edges of rivers, at mountain passes, at hunting grounds. They traded shells for hides, stories for tools, songs for songs. And sometimes they fought. Conflict was as much a part of humanity as cooperation. Yet even in conflict, something new was learned, carried, exchanged. Humanity was no longer one path, but many intertwined paths, touching and crossing again and again. Consider how remarkable this is. In less than 50,000 years, sapiens had not only left Africa, but had become a global species. They had transformed, adapted, split into countless cultures, countless languages, countless ways of life. And yet, their hearts beat with the same rhythm. They still buried their dead. They still painted, carved, and sang. They still dreamed of things beyond themselves. The diversity of humanity was not weakness, it was strength. For when the world shifted, when the ice advanced or the forests changed, it was not one way of life that carried the species forward, but many. If one failed, another endured. If one starved, another thrived. Humanity's gift was not sameness, but adaptability, variation, creativity. Step back now and look at the Earth of that time in your mind's eye. Fires burning in tundras, fires glowing in jungles, fires flickering in deserts, all separate yet all alike.
Many worlds, yet one humanity. And in those fires, the seeds of the future. Tribes becoming cultures, cultures becoming nations, nations becoming civilizations. The path of sapiens was unfolding, not in one line, but in countless branching streams. And still, above them all, the stars shone. The same stars for tundra and desert, forest and plain. The same sky, the same earth, the same species. Many voices, one story. Many paths, one journey.
With diversity came exchange. Groups met at the edges of rivers, at mountain passes, at hunting grounds. They traded shells for hides, stories for tools, songs for songs. And sometimes they fought. Conflict was as much a part of humanity as cooperation. Yet even in conflict, something. From wanderers to settlers. As the millennia passed, humans who had once roamed endlessly began to notice patterns in the land, in the rivers, in the seasons. Where animals grazed, where plants flourished, where the soil held water, there were opportunities. Opportunities not just to survive, but to stay. In some places, hunting and gathering alone was enough. In others, the land whispered a new promise, the chance to settle, to cultivate, to shape the world rather than just respond to it. The first settlements were small. A few families might stay by a riverbank, a sheltered valley, or a coastal inlet. Their homes were simple, built of wood, stone, mud, and reed. Fires were lit not only for warmth, but for cooking, for companionship, for rituals. These first villages were fragile, dependent on careful observation of the land. Humans were learning to read the seasons, to track the migrations of animals, to anticipate the floods and the droughts. And then came domestication. The wolves that once circled at the edges of campfires became companions. Over generations, their descendants became dogs, guardians, hunters, partners. Sheep, goats, and cattle were gradually brought closer, tamed and bred. Humans began to shape the genetics of the animals they relied on, though slowly and unconsciously at first. Plants, too, were noticed. Some seeds grew best in loose soil near the camp. Some tubers thrived when stored carefully. Humans began planting them, tending them, harvesting them with deliberate care. The earth became a canvas, and humans the gardeners of their own survival. With settlement came community. Life in small villages required coordination. Families needed to share water and food to defend against predators and rival groups. Social bonds strengthened. Rituals were born, as were traditions. Songs to mark planting, dances to celebrate harvests, stories to explain the world and teach the young. In these early communities, humans were experimenting with collaboration, governance, and culture. Language became more nuanced, gestures more meaningful, and memory became collective. Time itself took on a new meaning. No longer was life dictated only by immediate survival, by the hunt of the day or the cold of the night. The turning of the seasons became a rhythm, a calendar. The rising of the sun, the waxing of the moon, the migration of birds, all were watched, recorded, remembered. Early humans began to anticipate, to plan, to imagine life months ahead. In this, Homo sapiens' mental evolution accelerated, feeding the slow but steady growth of culture and knowledge. The first agriculture emerged not in one place, but in many. The Fertile Crescent, with its rich alluvial soils, saw the domestication of wheat and barley. In the lush valleys of China, rice paddies began to take shape. Maize, beans, and squash were cultivated in the Americas. Each region developed its own methods, its own understanding of the land and its gifts. Agriculture was not just a means of survival, it was the first act of humans shaping the world intentionally, a profound turning point in our history. And yet, the path was never simple. Settled life brought new challenges. Disease traveled faster when humans clustered together. Crops could fail, floods could sweep away carefully tended fields, and neighbors could become rivals over the most fertile land. Humans adapted, learned, experimented, They dug irrigation channels, built storage pits, created fences and walls, and refined tools. Each challenge spurred invention. Each failure became a lesson etched into the memory of communities. With permanence came innovation. Pottery allowed storage of surplus grains. Weaving of fibers made clothing more sophisticated. Stone tools were refined into polished axes and sickles. Humans began to manipulate fire in new ways, for cooking, for pottery, for metalwork. The foundations of technology, economy, and art were quietly laid in these early settlements. Imagine a valley bathed in dawnlight. Smoke rises from several small fires. Children play among the reeds while adults tend fields in flocks. Dogs lie in the sun. The rhythm of life is slower than the hunt, yet deeper, more enduring. Humans have discovered a new kind of relationship with the earth, one of nurturing, of anticipation, of careful stewardship. It is here, in these humble villages, that the seeds of civilizations to come are planted, both literally and metaphorically. And though Homo sapiens still wandered at the edges of deserts, forests, and mountains, a new path had begun, a path of permanence, creativity, and shared knowledge. The slow evolution of the body continued, but the evolution of culture, thought, and society began to accelerate in ways no single human could contain. Settlers, farmers, and village dwellers were the harbingers of a future that would eventually stretch across continents, creating cities, kingdoms, and empires. In this quiet turning point, humanity learned perhaps its most important lesson. The world could be shaped, not just endured. And in shaping it, humans shaped themselves. The dawn of towns and trade. As the first villages stabilized and grew, the lives of Homo sapiens began to change in profound ways. No longer was survival solely a matter of immediate needs. The accumulation of resources, knowledge, and connections became essential. Families and small groups started clustering together into larger communities. Simple settlements expanded into what we might recognize as the very first towns, hubs of activity, exchange, and collective ambition. These early towns were not grand or imposing by modern standards, but they represented a radical shift. Structures were more permanent, often built of stone, mud brick, or timber. Paths connected homes, storage areas, workshops, and communal spaces. Villagers began to specialize. Some focused on tending flocks, others on cultivating particular crops, still others on crafting tools, pottery, or textiles. Specialization fostered efficiency, and efficiency allowed surplus, a precious resource that would become the bedrock of trade.
Trade itself began modestly. A farmer might exchange extra grain for crafted tools. A potter might trade a clay vessel for a bundle of dried meat. But over time, these exchanges became more organized and widespread. Humans began to recognize the value of rare materials, of knowledge, of skills. Obsidian, flint, shells, and metals were moved across distances once unimaginable, connecting communities and creating early networks of commerce. Trade encouraged communication, cultural exchange, and innovation. A tool or technique learned in one village might be adapted and improved in another, creating a ripple effect that accelerated human ingenuity. Alongside trade came social complexity. Hierarchies emerged naturally as some individuals became more influential due to skill, knowledge, or ability to lead. Elders often guided decisions, particularly regarding land, resources, and communal rituals. Leadership was subtle, often consensual, but it laid the groundwork for the organized societies that would eventually dominate the landscape. Communities learned to balance cooperation and competition, establishing rules, norms, and early systems of justice, often codified in oral traditions, stories, or rituals rather than written laws.
Religion and ritual also gained prominence. Humans sought meaning in their work, their survival, and the patterns they observed in nature. Ceremonies celebrated harvests, honored ancestors, and asked for protection from forces beyond their understanding. Temples, shrines, or sacred sites became focal points of early towns, symbols of unity and shared belief. These spiritual practices reinforced social bonds and helped maintain order, reminding communities that each individual was part of something greater than themselves. The physical layout of towns reflected growing sophistication. Roads and paths were carefully planned. Communal spaces allowed gatherings and markets. Storage facilities safeguarded surplus food and valuables, providing security and stability. Workshops hummed with the creation of tools, ornaments, and textiles. In these towns, humans were learning to manipulate both their environment and their societies, creating systems that extended far beyond immediate survival. With the expansion of towns came learning and record-keeping. Counting became essential for grains, animals, and trade. Symbols emerged to track quantities and transactions. Early humans were laying the foundation for writing, mathematics, and complex communication. Knowledge became portable, transferable, and cumulative. Each generation could build upon the achievements of the previous one, creating a slow but steady ascent toward organized civilization. Despite these advancements, life in early towns was not without challenge. Disease spread more rapidly in densely populated areas. Competition for land and water sparked conflicts. Environmental changes forced adaptation and migration. Yet humans persisted, experimenting, innovating, and cooperating in ways their ancestors had never needed to do. The pressure of these challenges, combined with the opportunities of settled life, further accelerated cognitive and social evolution. Picture a town at dusk. Smoke curls from several fires. Traders barter across open-air markets. Children chase each other between homes. Craftsmen shape tools and vessels in small workshops, while elders gather to discuss the future of their people. The rhythm of life is structured yet lively, a delicate balance of labor, learning, and leisure. It is in these small, bustling towns that Homo sapiens first began to experience the complexity of society, the beginning of a networked, collaborative, and ambitious species. The slow evolution of Homo sapiens was no longer only about biology. It was cultural, social, and intellectual. Each town, each trade, each shared ritual became a stepping stone, expanding the horizon of what humans could achieve together. From these modest beginnings, the first civilizations would one day emerge, shaped by the cumulative wisdom and creativity of countless generations. Agriculture and the foundations of civilization. As Homo sapiens continued to refine their skills, a profound transformation unfolded across the landscape: the shift from nomadic foraging to agriculture. This was not a sudden change, but a slow, deliberate evolution, a series of small experiments and discoveries that gradually redefined what it meant to live on Earth. Humans began to understand the patterns of seasons, rainfall, soil fertility, and plant growth. The first careful planting of seeds marked the birth of farming, a practice that would reshape human life forever. Agriculture allowed humans to stay in one place for extended periods. Villages expanded into permanent settlements, and these settlements gradually became towns and early cities. Unlike the fleeting camps of the past, these communities required planning, organization, and cooperation on a scale never before attempted. Houses were built to endure the seasons, storage pits protected surplus food, and irrigation channels slowly transformed parched lands into fertile fields. The mastery of food production gave humans a measure of security previously unimaginable. Hunger became less immediate, allowing the mind to wander beyond survival and explore creativity, culture, and innovation. The cultivation of crops also led to domestication of animals. Goats, sheep, cattle, and pigs were tamed and bred for food, labor, and companionship. Animals became partners in the human story, providing not only sustenance, but also wool, leather, milk, and even assistance in farming.
The careful observation and understanding of animal behavior reflected the growing cognitive sophistication of early Homo sapiens. Communities learned to manage flocks, rotate grazing lands, and prevent disease, skills that required both empathy and intelligence. With food security came population growth. Settlements swelled, creating the need for structured governance and social systems. Leaders and councils arose, often guided by experience, wisdom, or charisma, to coordinate labor, manage resources, and resolve disputes. Social hierarchies became more complex, reflecting differences in wealth, skill, and access to resources. Even the earliest forms of taxation emerged. Portions of crops or livestock were contributed to support communal projects, defense, or ritual celebrations.
Trade networks expanded dramatically. Surplus crops and animal products allowed communities to exchange for goods they could not produce themselves. Salt, obsidian, pottery, and metals traveled long distances, connecting distant regions in webs of economic and cultural exchange. These interactions spread ideas, technologies, and customs, creating a tapestry of human innovation across continents. Artistic expression blossomed alongside these exchanges. Decorative pottery, woven textiles, carved figurines, and early musical instruments reflected the increasing complexity of human culture, as well as the desire to express identity, belief, and creativity. The intellectual growth of humanity accelerated. Observation, experimentation, and communication became the pillars of progress. Early humans developed rudimentary calendars to track seasons and planting cycles. Knowledge of medicinal plants expanded. Techniques for preserving food were refined, ensuring survival through harsh winters and unpredictable droughts. Writing, initially in the form of symbols and pictographs, began to emerge as a tool to record trade, harvests, and stories, planting the seeds of history itself.
Yet, life in these growing settlements was not without tension. Conflicts over land, water, and resources occasionally flared into skirmishes between neighboring villages. Disease spread more easily among dense populations, forcing humans to develop strategies for hygiene and quarantine. Environmental changes challenged even the most prepared communities, demanding adaptability, resilience, and ingenuity. Through these trials, Homo sapiens learned lessons about cooperation, leadership, and the importance of planning, lessons that would echo through millennia. Imagine a vast village at the height of planting season. Fields stretch in neat rows, workers bending over crops while others guide oxen along irrigation channels. Smoke rises from homes as families prepare meals. Children chase each other along the paths, their laughter mingling with the sounds of tools and animals. Traders arrive from distant settlements, carrying rare goods and sharing news from other regions. Storytellers gather at communal fires, passing down songs, legends, and wisdom. The air hums with life, ambition, and curiosity, a world teeming with human possibility. Through agriculture, permanent settlements, and regional trade, Homo sapiens were not just surviving, they were crafting the foundations of civilization. Every planted seed, every tamed animal, and every exchanged good contributed to the slow, deliberate evolution of society. The stage was set for the rise of cities, the birth of writing, the creation of organized religions, and the expansion of human knowledge and imagination. Humanity had taken a decisive step from the wild nomadic past toward a future of collective achievement, curiosity, and creativity.
The dawn of civilization. With the foundations of agriculture and permanent settlements firmly in place, Homo sapiens entered a new chapter, the rise of civilization. This was a slow, awe-inspiring evolution, a tapestry of innovation, creativity, and social complexity woven over generations. Villages expanded into towns, and towns blossomed into the earliest cities, places where humans could gather, create, and organize in ways that were previously unimaginable. These urban centers were the heartbeat of human progress, hubs of knowledge, trade, culture, and communal life. The construction of monumental structures began to define these cities, from towering ziggurats in Mesopotamia to grand stone temples in the Nile Valley. Early humans demonstrated remarkable engineering skills, combining mathematics, observation, and sheer labor to shape their environments. Each stone, each beam, and each carved relief told a story of human ingenuity, a testament to a species learning not only to survive, but to thrive collectively. Architecture became more than shelter. It became a canvas for belief, ambition, and identity.
As populations grew denser, governance structures evolved to manage the complexities of urban life. Kings, councils, and religious leaders emerged, creating systems of law, order, and organization. Taxes supported monumental projects and armies. Scribes kept detailed records of trade, harvests, and civic matters. Social hierarchies became more defined, reflecting both skill and status. Yet the cohesion of community depended on cooperation, shared responsibility, and collective effort. Trade expanded beyond local regions, connecting civilizations across continents. The exchange of goods, ideas, and technologies created a vibrant web of interaction. Bronze tools, precious metals, pottery, and textiles traveled long distances, linking distant peoples and spreading innovations at an unprecedented pace. Alongside trade, writing flourished, evolving from pictographs into cuneiform, hieroglyphs, and early alphabets. Through writing, humans could record history, codify laws, and pass knowledge across generations, ensuring that lessons, myths, and achievements were preserved far beyond the lifespan of any individual. Cultural and intellectual growth surged alongside societal organization. Astronomy, mathematics, medicine, and art advanced in tandem with urban life. Calendars were refined to track celestial events and agricultural cycles. Healing practices became more sophisticated, blending observation with experimentation. Artisans crafted intricate jewelry, pottery, and sculpture, expressing both spiritual devotion and aesthetic beauty. Music and storytelling filled streets and courts, weaving a shared human experience into every aspect of life. Religion and spirituality provided a guiding framework, connecting humans to the mysteries of existence. Temples, shrines, and sacred spaces became focal points of communal life, where rituals and ceremonies marked the cycles of birth, harvest, and death. Belief systems shaped morality, social cohesion, and artistic expression, offering meaning in an ever-expanding world. Despite these advancements, challenges persisted. Conflicts arose over resources, territory, and influence. Disease and famine tested the resilience of cities, prompting innovations in medicine, sanitation, and infrastructure. Yet, through trial and error, Homo sapiens continued to adapt, learning the delicate balance between human ambition and environmental constraints. Picture a bustling city by a great river. Merchants shout as they display goods along winding streets. Farmers bring fresh produce from nearby fields, while scribes meticulously record transactions on clay tablets. Children chase one another along stone pathways, while elders share stories under the shade of grand temples. The air is filled with the scent of cooking fires, the rhythm of labor, the hum of conversation, and the distant echo of music. Every face reflects a story, every action a contribution to the unfolding drama of civilization. By the end of this era, humans had achieved a remarkable transformation, from scattered nomadic bands to complex societies capable of shaping the world around them. Civilization was no longer a distant dream. It was a living, breathing reality, built on millennia of slow evolution, experimentation, and collective learning. The journey of Homo sapiens had entered a new dimension, a world of innovation, culture, and enduring legacy. The rise of empires and knowledge. As humans built cities and civilizations, certain regions emerged as centers of immense influence and power.
The Fertile Crescent, the Nile Valley, the Indus Valley, and the Yellow River Basin became cradles of civilization where populations flourished, agriculture thrived, and culture blossomed. From these hubs arose the first great empires: Akkad, Babylon, Egypt, Shang, and later civilizations such as Persia, Greece, and Rome. These empires were not just political entities, they were crucibles of human ingenuity, where innovation, governance, and culture intertwined to shape societies for generations. Empires demanded organization on a massive scale. Roads, canals, and aqueducts connected cities and regions, enabling trade, communication, and military movement. Written laws, like Hammurabi's Code, codified justice and social responsibility. Early administrations maintained meticulous records, ensuring that taxes, resources, and labor were efficiently managed. From city streets to royal courts, the pulse of civilization beat in rhythm with structured governance and collective cooperation. Trade expanded far beyond the borders of empires. Caravans crossed deserts, ships sailed across seas, and merchants carried goods, ideas, and technologies between distant lands. Spices from India reached the Mediterranean. Silk from China traveled along the fabled Silk Road. Metals and gems flowed between Africa and Europe. Alongside these tangible exchanges came the sharing of knowledge, philosophies, and cultural practices. Religion, language, and art transcended borders, shaping civilizations far from their origin. Intellectual advancement flourished in tandem with empire building. Mathematics, astronomy, and engineering made leaps that would lay foundations for future generations. The Egyptians aligned pyramids with celestial patterns. Babylonian astronomers predicted eclipses. Greek philosophers pondered the nature of reality, ethics, and the cosmos. Medicine advanced in places like India and Alexandria, combining observation with experimentation to understand the human body and the natural world. Art and culture reflected the grandeur of these empires. Temples, palaces, and statues commemorated kings and gods, immortalizing achievements in stone and metal. Literature captured myths, history, and philosophical ideas, from the Epic of Gilgamesh to Homer's Iliad. Music and theater became central to communal life, expressing shared values, emotions, and beliefs. Across continents, humans sought beauty, meaning, and understanding, their creativity as enduring as the monuments they built. Yet, with power came complexity. Conflicts erupted over territory, resources, and ideology. Rival empires battled for dominance, while internal strife tested governance and stability. Disease and famine reminded civilizations of the fragility of human life, prompting innovations in agriculture, sanitation, and medicine. Empires rose and fell, leaving legacies that inspired future generations and reshaped the political and cultural landscape of the world. Daily life for ordinary humans was a delicate balance of labor, community, and ritual. Farmers tended crops and livestock, artisans crafted tools and art, and families nurtured children while maintaining the traditions and beliefs of their ancestors. Markets buzzed with trade, while temples and public spaces hosted ceremonies and civic gatherings. Education became increasingly valued in some societies, allowing scribes, philosophers, and scholars to pass knowledge across generations. Consider walking through an ancient city. Stone-paved streets lined with market stalls, the aroma of fresh bread and incense in the air. Children play near fountains, while merchants display vibrant textiles and exotic spices. Temples rise majestically above homes, their walls carved with symbols and stories. Scholars debate philosophy in open courtyards. Astronomers chart the stars. Artisans craft pottery and jewelry, each piece a blend of function and beauty. The city pulses with life, a microcosm of the empire's power and potential. By the end of this era, humans had mastered organization, trade, and cultural expression at unprecedented scales. Empires connected distant peoples, philosophies traveled alongside goods, and scientific inquiry began to illuminate the mysteries of the natural world. Homo sapiens had evolved not only biologically, but socially, intellectually, and culturally, laying the groundwork for the interconnected civilizations of the future. The Age of Discovery and Knowledge. As human civilizations expanded, curiosity became a driving force that pushed individuals to explore the boundaries of the known world. From the bustling cities of the Mediterranean to the dynasties of East Asia, humans began charting seas, mapping lands, and questioning the universe around them. The thirst for understanding grew not only in philosophy and science, but also in geography, mathematics, and technology. The slow evolution of Homo sapiens was now mirrored by the rapid evolution of human knowledge, as societies learned not only from their own experiences, but also from those of distant peoples. Exploration reshaped the world in profound ways. Ancient mariners braved treacherous seas in vessels guided by the stars, by the currents, and by early navigational instruments. The Phoenicians sailed across the Mediterranean, leaving traces of their language and trade networks. Polynesians voyaged across vast Pacific distances, colonizing islands thousands of kilometers apart with astonishing precision. Over centuries, knowledge of winds, tides, and celestial navigation became increasingly sophisticated, allowing humans to traverse oceans, trade goods, and exchange ideas across continents. Meanwhile, intellectual centers flourished in cities like Athens, Alexandria, Baghdad, and Chang'an. Scholars devoted themselves to studying mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and natural philosophy. Ancient texts were meticulously copied, preserved, and translated, ensuring that knowledge endured even as empires rose and fell. Calculations of planetary motion, observations of eclipses, and studies of anatomy revealed the subtle complexity of the universe, laying the foundations for discoveries that would come millennia later. Trade and cultural exchange deepened human understanding. Along the Silk Road, caravans carried not only silk, spices, and precious metals, but also ideas, religions, and technologies. Paper and printing techniques traveled from China to the Islamic world and later to Europe, transforming education and communication. Architectural techniques, agricultural practices, and artistic styles migrated along with merchants and travelers, blending local traditions with foreign innovations. Through these interactions, Homo sapiens collectively expanded their capacity for imagination, creativity, and problem-solving. At the same time, the natural world beckoned. Observers documented plants, animals, and landscapes, creating rudimentary encyclopedias that cataloged Earth's biodiversity. Early scientists experimented with tools and instruments, seeking patterns in the heavens and the Earth. Alchemists explored the properties of metals and chemicals, laying the groundwork for modern chemistry. Philosophers debated ethics, politics, and the nature of existence, while poets and artists captured the human experience in ways that transcended generations. Knowledge, like a river, flowed across civilizations, growing richer and more interconnected with every passing century. Exploration was not without risk. Mariners faced storms, pirates, and the unknown. Scholars and inventors sometimes challenged prevailing authorities and beliefs, risking censure or persecution. Yet, the human drive to understand and innovate persevered. Each new discovery, whether a distant land, a celestial body, or a microscopic organism, contributed to the collective awareness of what it meant to be Homo sapiens, a species capable of curiosity, reflection, and imagination beyond immediate survival. The rise of early empires, trade networks, and intellectual centers had already transformed societies, but this age of discovery added a new dimension. Humans were no longer limited by local knowledge or experience. Ideas and innovations could leap across continents, connecting minds separated by oceans and mountains. Each exchange of knowledge accelerated progress, creating a feedback loop where observation led to invention, invention to exploration, and exploration to deeper understanding.
At the same time, the natural world beckoned. Observers documented plants, animals, and considered the small yet profound acts that shaped this period. A cartographer carefully sketching coastlines from travelers' tales. A mathematician calculating the trajectory of a planet. A merchant learning a foreign language to negotiate with distant partners. A philosopher debating the nature of the cosmos in candlelit libraries. These individuals, driven by curiosity and persistence, exemplified the slow but relentless evolution of human thought. By the end of this era, Homo sapiens had mastered not only survival and organization, but also the pursuit of knowledge on a global scale. Societies were increasingly interconnected, science and philosophy flourished, and the human imagination expanded to encompass worlds beyond immediate perception. The foundations were laid for the Renaissance, the age of global exploration, and the technological revolutions that would follow, all stemming from the same innate curiosity that had driven humans for tens of thousands of years. The slow evolution of Homo sapiens was no longer just a story of physical adaptation, but a testament to intellectual growth, cultural expansion, and the power of human curiosity. In this age, the species reached a turning point. The mind became as powerful a tool as the hand, and knowledge became a bridge linking past, present, and future.
The Renaissance and the dawn of modern thought. As the centuries passed, human civilization continued to unfold with a remarkable intensity. From the quiet cultivation of crops and the construction of early towns to the sprawling empires and global trade of previous eras, Homo sapiens had already transformed the Earth. Yet the species was about to enter a period of extraordinary intellectual and cultural awakening, the Renaissance. This was a time when curiosity, creativity, and reason converged, producing leaps in art, science, and philosophy that reshaped human understanding and society. The Renaissance was born in the cities of Italy, Florence, Venice, and Rome, where wealth, trade, and patronage created fertile ground for the flowering of knowledge. Artists like Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo pushed the boundaries of imagination and observation, blending creativity with careful study of anatomy, perspective, and nature. Paintings and sculptures were no longer mere decoration. They became a study of the human form, of emotion, of light and shadow, reflecting a deepening awareness of the physical and spiritual world. Simultaneously, science began to assert its place alongside art and philosophy. Observers studied the heavens, the earth, and the human body with unprecedented rigor. Astronomers like Copernicus and Galileo challenged centuries-old ideas, suggesting that the Earth was not the center of the universe, but part of a vast, dynamic cosmos. Physicians and anatomists dissected and documented the human body, revealing the complexity of organs, systems, and functions. Each experiment, each observation, each careful recording of data advanced humanity's understanding of the natural world. Mathematics and engineering flourished as well. Architects designed intricate cathedrals and bridges, relying on advanced geometry and mechanics. Navigators employed better instruments and maps, opening new trade routes and avenues of exploration. Inventions such as the printing press revolutionized the dissemination of knowledge, allowing ideas to travel farther and faster than ever before. For the first time in human history, information became widely accessible, enabling an unprecedented exchange of ideas across Europe and, eventually, the world. This period also witnessed the gradual rise of modern philosophy and political thought. Thinkers like Machiavelli, Bacon, and Descartes questioned old assumptions, advocating for reason, empirical evidence, and critical inquiry.
Ethics, governance, and human behavior became subjects for rigorous reflection, laying the foundations for later scientific, political, and social revolutions. Humans were beginning to understand themselves not just as survivors or artisans, but as thinkers, observers, and agents capable of shaping their own destiny.
Trade and exploration, which had long connected distant civilizations, intensified. European explorers sailed across oceans, discovering new continents, cultures, and resources. These voyages expanded knowledge and sparked cultural exchange, but also brought challenges: conflict, colonization, and the need to navigate unfamiliar ecosystems. Yet the human drive for understanding, discovery, and innovation continued to accelerate, fueled by curiosity and ambition. Art, science, and exploration converged in ways that transformed everyday life. Cities became centers of learning, workshops, and marketplaces. Scholars debated ideas in libraries and salons, while artisans applied newfound knowledge to practical and creative endeavors. Instruments measured the stars and planets, compasses guided ships across seas, mechanical devices performed tasks once thought impossible. Humanity was stepping into a new era, one defined not only by survival and settlement, but by intellectual mastery and the expansion of human potential. Even ordinary life reflected these changes. Markets overflowed with exotic goods, from spices to silks. Families exchanged letters and books. Communities celebrated festivals that combined religious devotion with artistic performance. Education spread beyond elites, reaching broader audiences and nurturing curiosity in young minds. Knowledge, once fragile and localized, now traversed cities, regions, and continents, accumulating in ways that shaped future generations. Through the Renaissance, Homo sapiens demonstrated a remarkable truth. The species' evolution was not just physical or social, but intellectual. Curiosity became a tool for survival and for growth, creativity a means of understanding, and collaboration a force for enduring achievement. The seeds sown in this era, in art, science, exploration, and thought, would bloom in the centuries to come, leading to the scientific revolution, the industrial revolution, and the modern age we inhabit today. Imagine standing in Florence, gazing at a cathedral, or observing a workshop where artisans carve, paint, and experiment. Outside, merchants carry goods from distant lands, while scholars debate ideas in candlelit libraries. The hum of progress resonates in the streets, a subtle yet powerful reminder that humanity is no longer only shaped by nature, but also by the mind. Homo sapiens had become architects of their own evolution, cultural, intellectual, and social, stepping into the modern world with curiosity, creativity, and courage. The scientific revolution and the birth of modern civilization. As the Renaissance gradually gave way to the scientific revolution, humanity entered a period of profound transformation. The thirst for knowledge, curiosity, and experimentation that had flourished in earlier centuries now accelerated at an unprecedented pace. Homo sapiens were no longer content with inherited wisdom. They began to question, measure, and understand the natural world in entirely new ways. This was an era where observation replaced assumption, experimentation replaced speculation, and evidence became the foundation of understanding. During this period, minds like Galileo Galilei, Johannes Kepler, and Isaac Newton reshaped humanity's perception of the universe. Galileo turned his telescope to the heavens, revealing moons orbiting Jupiter and challenging the long-held belief that Earth was the center of creation. Kepler deciphered the elegant laws of planetary motion, revealing a cosmos bound by mathematical order. Newton's work on gravity and motion codified the principles that would guide not only physics, but also the human imagination for centuries to come. Each discovery was a stepping stone, a moment when humanity lifted the veil on the mysteries of existence. Simultaneously, the life sciences took transformative leaps. Physicians and anatomists dissected the human body with increasing precision, mapping veins, muscles, and organs. Pioneers like William Harvey discovered the circulation of blood, revealing the intricate machinery that sustained life itself. In parallel, botanists, zoologists, and naturalists explored plants, animals, and minerals, cataloging the diversity of the world with meticulous care. Knowledge was no longer abstract. It became systematic, empirical, and cumulative, laying the groundwork for modern biology, chemistry, and medicine. The era was also marked by the Enlightenment, a philosophical awakening that emphasized reason, logic, and the pursuit of human progress. Thinkers like Voltaire, Rousseau, Locke, and Kant challenged traditional authority, questioning monarchies, dogma, and rigid hierarchies. They championed liberty, equality, and intellectual freedom, advocating for societies governed by reason and guided by evidence rather than superstition. Homo sapiens began to see themselves not only as observers of nature, but as architects of their own societies, capable of shaping morality, governance, and the course of history. Technological innovations surged alongside philosophical thought. The printing press, perfected centuries earlier, now enabled the rapid dissemination of ideas, scientific discoveries, and literature. Navigational tools, clocks, microscopes, and telescopes allowed humans to explore previously inaccessible realms, from the depths of the ocean to the farthest reaches of the heavens. Workshops and laboratories became theaters of discovery, where curiosity, patience, and precision produced inventions that would transform everyday life. Exploration of the Earth itself intensified. Expeditions mapped continents, discovered new species, and documented cultures across the globe. While these journeys expanded knowledge, they also exposed humanity to the complexity of the natural world and the interconnectedness of societies. Trade, cultural exchange, and sometimes conflict accompanied these discoveries, weaving a complex tapestry of interaction that would shape global history. Homo sapiens were becoming not just inhabitants of the Earth, but explorers, chroniclers, and innovators of their own destiny. Education, once limited to a select few, gradually spread. Universities, academies, and scientific societies became hubs for collaboration and debate. Experiments were replicated, theories refined, and ideas debated in public and private forums. The spirit of inquiry was contagious. Curiosity became a virtue, and observation a skill honed across generations. Human intellect, once fragmented and localized, was now a growing collective force with the potential to reshape the world.
Even everyday life reflected these transformations. Cities became centers of commerce, learning, and innovation. People engaged in discussions about governance, ethics, science, and art. Tools and machines transformed labor, while medicine improved health and longevity. Knowledge was no longer static. It moved, evolved, and multiplied. Homo sapiens, once largely defined by survival, were now defined by their ability to understand, invent, and transform the environment around them. In this era, humanity's evolution was as much intellectual as it was social. The mind became the ultimate frontier, a tool to unlock the mysteries of the cosmos, the intricacies of life, and the principles of society. Each discovery, each insight was a step in a long journey, stretching back to the earliest humans and reaching forward to the future. Homo sapiens were learning to shape not only their survival, but also the very trajectory of civilization itself. As we look back on this transformative age, we see a species awakening to its full potential. The scientific revolution and the Enlightenment remind us that curiosity, reason, and collaboration are not mere traits. They are the engines of progress, propelling humanity forward through centuries of change. Each observation, each experiment, each idea carried the legacy of millennia, guiding Homo sapiens ever closer to the modern world we now inhabit.
Homo sapiens today,
and the endless horizon. As we arrive at the final chapter of this journey, let us pause and reflect on the incredible voyage of Homo sapiens, from the fragile, curious beings emerging from Africa millions of years ago, to the architects of civilizations, explorers of space, and shapers of knowledge in our modern age. Our species' story is not only one of survival, but also of ingenuity, creativity, and a relentless drive to understand the world and our place within it. From the earliest tools chipped from stone to the digital devices we hold in our hands today, humanity has continually transformed its environment. Language, once a simple method of communication, became a bridge to culture, philosophy, and the preservation of knowledge across generations. Fire, once a means of warmth and protection, ignited technological revolutions and social cohesion. Each innovation, discovery, and insight was a step forward, a testament to the adaptability and vision of Homo sapiens.
In the modern world, the canvas of human possibility stretches wider than ever before. We have unraveled the structure of DNA, mapped the cosmos, decoded the history written in rocks and fossils, and simulated the workings of the human mind. Medicine has advanced to unprecedented levels, prolonging life and enhancing its quality. Societies have been reshaped by thought, empathy, and collective endeavor. Yet, despite our knowledge and power, we remain connected to the same forces that shaped our ancestors: curiosity, imagination, and the instinct to explore. The Earth we inhabit is vastly different from the one that nurtured our early ancestors, yet it is still intimately tied to them. The rivers, mountains, deserts, and forests that once witnessed the first steps of Homo sapiens continue to bear witness to our journey. We have learned to navigate, cultivate, and protect our world, but we are also reminded that we are a part of a larger ecosystem, interconnected with countless other species, bound by the same fundamental laws of nature. As we consider our species' place in the present, we cannot help but ponder the future. Homo sapiens now gaze beyond the confines of our planet, venturing into space, dreaming of distant worlds, and imagining civilizations among the stars. The tools we create, the knowledge we accumulate, and the stories we share are the legacy of millions of years of evolution, a bridge from the ancient past to the possibilities of tomorrow. Yet even as we reach outward, it is the quiet moments, reflection, curiosity, storytelling, and wonder that define our humanity. Each one of us carries the echo of our ancestors, their struggles and triumphs woven into our genes and our culture. We are both products of evolution and participants in an ongoing experiment, shaping the Earth and ourselves in ways our earliest forebears could scarcely imagine. Homo sapiens have endured ice ages, plagues, migrations, wars, and transformations of every kind. And through it all, we have evolved not just biologically, but intellectually, socially, and spiritually. We are a species that learns, adapts, and dreams, capable of creating civilizations of immense beauty, complexity, and understanding. Every step, every discovery, every story told across generations is a testament to the slow, patient, and miraculous evolution that brought us to this moment. As our journey together draws to a close, I invite you to sit back, let your mind wander, and feel a quiet gratitude for the vast web of life that has shaped us. From the first spark of curiosity in ancient humans to the boundless questions we ask today, Homo sapiens remain explorers at heart, seekers of knowledge, creators of meaning, and stewards of a world still unfolding before us. And now, dear listener, as your eyes grow heavy and the world outside dims into quiet night, I will leave you with this gentle thought, that the story of Homo sapiens is far from over. Each day we live, each choice we make, each new idea we explore adds another chapter to this ongoing adventure. May you rest with wonder in your heart, curiosity in your mind, and peace in your soul. Good night, dear traveler.
Sleep well and dream of the endless horizons yet to come.